I appreciate the opportunity.
No worries. And indeed, this opportunity is here and it is now. Welcome, everybody, to A Tippling Philosopher. This is me, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. You should know me by now. I am super excited to have yet another awesome guest. And tonight I'll be speaking to, well, I say tonight, you could be anywhere in the world. So it might be very early in the morning and you haven't even had your coffee. But I'm super excited to be speaking to Gayle Jordan, who is someone who has experienced religion and leaving religion, and then helping people who are in the process of leaving religion, no doubt learning from her own experiences and from the expertise of others involved in, supporting and helping those who are struggling. But we will talk about all of that, and we'll talk about her journey in a second. But I guess let's let her introduce herself. Thank you so much, Gail, for coming on.
Johnny, thank you for having me. It's a joy and a pleasure to be with you. As you introduced me, I'm Gayle Jordan. My identity, I'm an attorney by profession, but I identify just as much with being the executive director of Recovering from Religion. And I'll give you the elevator pitch. Recovering from Religion is a nonprofit. Our mission statement's pretty straightforward. We seek to provide hope, healing, and support for folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief, which is so much bigger than that one sentence implies. But so I'm happy to talk about any number of things. But once again, thank you for the chance to be here.
Yeah, no problem. And there's so much scope for things we can talk about. But I guess let's start with you personally, and where you come from, or have come from, in terms of your experience with religion. And I do apologize if you've said this so many times before on other interviews, but it'd be really nice to get a picture of you as a former religious person and your formative years as a child, and the sort of family you had, the good and bad aspects of growing up in religion. So I guess, can you sort of detail your early life?
Sure. I grew up. It's pretty routine. It's not. There's nothing extraordinary about my
Mm.
story. My particular brand of religion was evangelical Christianity, specifically Southern Baptist. Both of my parents came from religious backgrounds, and I have a couple of brothers, and we were raised in church. We were there every time the door was open. The whole thing. I lived in suburbia in the southern part of the U.S. and the southeastern part of the U.S., which is, the Bible Belt, or some people even call it the buckle of the Bible Belt. And it was an ordinary childhood. I went through some questioning when I was a teenager, but overcame that. I was able to keep my faith strong in spite of all of those questions, and married a Christian man and had 4 little Christian children. And we had them in the church every time the doors were open when we were in leadership roles. And I was content. I had some issues with the faith, because being part of evangelical Christianity, I guess I would have considered myself a moderate person at the time, and yet evangelical Christianity is much more conservative than that. But I got over it. I knew my church didn't support women's reproductive health, all those things, and I knew I did. But the faith was more important to me at the time. I guess, looking back on it, when my children.
That's sorry to interrupt. That's really interesting. So there's always this tension between one's natural psychology, right? And we can talk about political psychology, because I've written some pieces previously on how people do church shopping, which is to say, which is to ask, what is more fundamental, one's political, which is kind of moral, one's political moral belief system, or one's religion? And it turns out that these days, and I don't know if this has changed, but these days people seem to find it easier to change church, to adapt their church to their political position, rather than adapt their political moral position to their church.
That's
And so
interesting.
there's some really interesting data coming out about church shopping. And I say that because you talked about how your moral compass was actually different to the church's moral compass, but actually you were able, or not in a position maybe, to shop different churches, maybe your family, whatever, but you adapted your maybe moral compass, or at least suppressed it, to fit in with the church. Is that fair? I don't know whether you
Yes,
could
that's
speak to that.
fair. And I was married to a military person, so we did move around quite a bit. And when we would go to look for a new church, and this was in our children's childhood years, when we would look for a new church from time to time, from different stations where we'd be assigned, we knew what we were looking for. We thought we were so progressive at the time. We weren't looking for hardcore. My then husband and I were more progressive than that, although he was not a progressive person and I didn't identify as a progressive person. We just knew we weren't hardcore fundamentalists. So the words, we weren't fundamentalist, we were conservative. And so there's a difference in those words. In our minds, there was a difference in those words. And so, yes, we did try to find a church that fit with that. But then, when you're inside the bubble, inside that religion bubble, you do think that you're in this entire spectrum, that there's this church in town and they're much more conservative, and this church in town, they're much more liberal, but they're all inside the bubble. They're all wrapped up with what the restrictions are and what the rules are and what the book says, and what instead of, and I didn't even give a thought to anything that was outside the bubble. Anything outside the bubble was out of the question. It was evil. It was worldly. My thought was, okay, how do I find something that's going to match who I am within that bubble? I didn't identify it that way at the time, but looking back on it, I see that even though I was thinking at the time that I was all open-minded and I was observant about what this church believes and what that church believes, it was still under the rule. It was still inside the package of religion. So when my children, I had 4 children very close together, and so when they reached their teenagerhood, and I loved being a mom. I just loved raising children. I loved watching their little minds grow. I loved everything about it. I just loved it. And so I had 4 children pretty quickly. I threw doubles the last time. That explains all that. But when they got to be teenagers,
I have twins as well. But
my girls, I had 2 boys and then I had twin girls, and they are the joy. All of them, all the kids have just been the joy of my life.
I have twin boys, and if you want to go through the whole joy of having like twins again, I would package them up and send them to you now. It's not a problem.
Yes. How old are your boys, John?
12.
Oh my God. Well, my girls are well past that. They're in their 30s. All my kids are in their 30s. But when they were little, and the thing is, I had all 4 of them close together. So I had a boy, immediately had a boy, and then immediately had the 2 girls. So I had all 4 of them in 3 years, which is insane.
Wow. So your children were obviously, then you've got this whole unit inside this church bubble, and just because for anyone who's watching this not in America, like the Southern Baptist Church wouldn't mean anything particularly unless you know about religion in America. So can you just briefly explain what flavor of Christianity Southern Baptist Church? I mean, it's got an interesting history itself.
It does. It does have an interesting history, and at the time that I was in, of course, it's evangelical Christianity, so that kind of gives you the foundation of what it is. This version of it has gone through an evolution itself. The convention, it's a massive convention in the United States. Plus, we have missionaries and missions all over the world. But it's much more conservative than it used to be. In the 60s, the Southern Baptist Convention was a supporter of abortion. We considered abortion health care. It wasn't so much we were a supporter of it; we just weren't opposed to it. It fell under the umbrella of health care. They were much more progressive and making progress in the 60s for the service of women. And even within the convention, there was room for more conservative churches and more liberal churches. And then the whole thing just went to hell in the whole 70s and 80s, when the whole thing, and they found abortion and what a political hot potato that was going to be. Wow. And so now there's not that much variance any longer from my perspective. I'm not in it anymore, but from what I observe from the outside, they have conformed and conformed and conformed until it's a pretty narrow definition of what a Southern Baptist church used to be. There were Southern Baptist churches that ordained women for service, and at Southern Baptist churches um, that had women on staff as pastors, different things. And now that's out of the question. That's unacceptable. It's a very narrow
Wow,
path.
that's a really
Yeah.
interesting regression there.
Yes. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Regression's a good word for it.
So, so you brought your children into the world, and then how did your journey continue?
So when they got to be teenagers, and I was so prepared for it, Johnny, because I had done my own questioning when I was a teenager, things that were inconsistent in the Bible that troubled me. But when my children had them, I had a different reaction to it. I was much more serious about it, and I validated it, and I was all that kind of mom. And I said, let's find answers to these questions. Those are good questions, because the children were asking about the anti-science in the Bible, the morality piece of it, the earth and the 6,000 years old. And so I said, let's do this. Let's see if we can find some answers. And so we set about. Now, I'm condensing it down, and it was a several years process. But we started out going to within our smallest bubble, which is within our church. We ask our pastors, our youth ministers, our Sunday school teachers, and then we would come back together and talk. Now, when I say we, I'm not including my then husband. He was struggling with me allowing the children to ask those questions. He had a little authoritative bent, and he wanted me to say to them the standard answer: God's ways are higher than our ways. There's things we're not going to understand. Let it go.
Which is interesting. I wonder how much, again, to talk about fundamental psychology going on. If you're the sort of person who is in the armed forces, then you are going to be in this hierarchical authoritarian setup where you just don't question authority. It's not really done.
And had no problem with that, and with that, without questioning that. That was the issue he was having. He was also, he's at the top of the food chain. He's a white guy, and that's the way it works. And I at least had the experience of having been a woman where there are certain things that I can't do. Why? Because I said so. And so I already had some resistance to that. But you're right. And if you are that kind of mentality, religion is much easier to take, because it's messy to think about all those things that you struggle with. It's just hard. It's hard work. You have to think about it when something new comes on the horizon. And for example, when we in the past years have been much more aware of the phenomenon of a trans person, we got to work through that. It's uncomfortable. It's first making me uncomfortable. I can't figure them out. Get over it and figure it out. Read about it and learn about it and understand the science and educate yourself about it. You may be uncomfortable for a while until you reach that point. So when you're in an authoritative environment, you don't have all that struggle. This is the way it is.
It's really interesting you say that, because in a bunch of interviews I've done recently, I've talked a lot about, and this has come up a lot, about how we celebrate free thinking and the idea that we make our own meaning, purpose, moral frameworks. We basically build everything from the ground up, and we don't go to church and have it inserted into our brains on a Sunday, right? And we celebrate how fantastic that is, but actually it's, as you say, it's really hard work, and a lot of people don't actually like that. So we can celebrate how wonderful that is, but actually there's an awful lot of people who like to go to church and be told what to think, because that is easier and it shortcuts to the conclusion. You don't need to question it. Job done. I'm now leaving full of morality and knowledge, and I go out and I'll just regurgitate that. And it's so much easier.
And Johnny, and don't, let's not diminish too the privilege of having the time to put into it, to understand and to think. When people are so busy just trying to get their job done and pay the bills and raise the children, it's a luxury to have a moment to take a deep breath. And if you do get those moments to yourself, the last thing you want to do is work harder at trying to figure something out. I mean, if you just want to put your feet up in a minute and get lost in House of the Dragon, or whatever that show is, House of Dragon, that's so it's a privilege to be able to do that. So we don't want to minimize the impact, of those layers upon people who are members of an authoritarian system, that it's not even that that's what they want to do. It's just a luxury that they don't have, to be able to put all of this work, all of this not even talking about the emotional heavy lifting of beginning to dissect one's upbringing and one's religion and all that. So there's a point of privilege in there too.
And sorry, we went off on tangents. So your children were starting to question.
Yes,
Sorry, I'm bad at
that's
this.
okay.
I'm
That's
just
okay. That free flow works for me too. No, they were starting to question. We started inside of our little religion bubble to figure the answers out, and there were answers to those questions. They were not satisfying answers, but religion has fundamental answers to those questions. Exactly, God's ways are higher than our ways. There are going to be some things we don't understand. Let's pray about it and see if we can come up with an answer, which is the way they brush my kids off in their Sunday school classes. They were also at that time were becoming teenagers with everything that involves their physical piece. They were becoming sexual human beings. They were starting high school. They were being exposed to people outside of their little rural elementary school where everybody was the same. Even though it was in the South, they were still being exposed to people of different faiths and people that didn't look like them or think like them. And so all of those things together were really pushing the children to ask these questions. And so the next step we took after trying to get an answer from inside the bubble, we started looking at history and anthropology and science and other religions. Yeah, right. And we would come together. The kids would go read and listen and learn, and I would go read, and we would come back together and we would talk about it. And of course, we took it apart in pieces because each of the children had their own personality, and each of the children were motivated on their own to begin to lose confidence in their beliefs, and they could explain it, and they made a good case for it. So one by one, according to their birth order and their personality, they were not as vested as me. They were ready to step away. They were not as forgiving. I was pretty forgiving by saying, yeah, the religion's imperfect, but. And the kids were not as willing to do that. So it was a little bit easier it was easier for them to step away. They had a lot of hard work to do, but it was a different experience for them. And so they started to step away. They were also graduating from college and graduating from high school and leaving for college. And so I was hanging on.
Were you a Sunday school teacher at the time?
I was a Sunday school teacher. My husband was chairman of the deacons. It was the whole package. And I was holding on. Where I landed at just about the time they were leaving as well. Yes, the Bible's imperfect. Yes, the religion's imperfect, but it's certainly there. He exists. The Bible may be inaccurate in some places. I can live with that, but I'm still going to hold on. But I was so vested in it. But as the children were starting to leave, I came to the conclusion that I no longer had confidence of my beliefs. But then the next decision I made was to fake it. I thought not.
So what were the particular issues was it just a whole suite of these things?
It
like
was,
the
it was
moral,
all of it.
historical?
So I say there were two tracks up down which my children made their decision. There was the science track where when you start to study that and the reality of the universe and how it behaves, the reality of evidence and what that means. This was very tangible to them.
I guess that's history as well.
Yes, the couple of my kids, that was their path. Couple of my kids, well, one of my twins, one of my daughters, was a morality issue. And she says now, this is years later, but she's able to articulate now what she was experiencing then. And that was, she didn't care if it was all true. It's immoral. Everything about the Bible that was immoral, with God killing everybody and wiping them out and saying, bash the infants' heads on the rocks and take the women as your bounty. And it was so immoral. She said, I'll go to hell for it. It was that immoral to her at the time. So her track, and I think sometimes we cross those things up. Both are valid. Both are valid reasons not to embrace this. If my daughter, who felt that way, eventually rejected the science piece of it. She eventually came to the conclusion, well, it's not true. So it's not true and it's immoral. But either one of those are valid impetus for questioning and walking away from your beliefs. And so the kids were sort of a mix. So I had made the decision. They were leaving me. I was in a southern town, religious southern town. All of my friends were at church. My entire community, my marriage was at risk because my then husband had made it clear, this was not negotiable, this my believing or not believing. So I had a really bad year or so when I knew I didn't believe it, still teaching Sunday school. I made some terrible decision. I had an affair or two. I was drinking a lot. I was the whole thing because I was stuck. My kids were leaving. I didn't believe this. I didn't know where to go. I didn't even entertain the idea of coming out. I thought, I can't tell people. I can't tell people. I'll lose everything. I'll lose a 30-year marriage. At the time, maybe 25, 26-year marriage. My parents were highly religious. My siblings were religious. My community would have rejected me. And I didn't have, except for my own children, I didn't have one non-believing friend. So I had a bad year or two.
Which is like so interesting because actually these days, as if it's massively different, but I guess it is in a way where you've had the world opened up by social media. If you start questioning things, the first thing you do is go online.
This was pre-internet. This was early internet when we were going through this whole process. I remember when I finally got to that point and I started looking, I guess it was Internet Explorer. I can't even remember. It was early days. And once I found that, you are absolutely right, Johnny. And that'll come into our conversation about recovering from religion in a little bit. But yes, it was a metaphorical lifeline for me because it was my way of getting out of my community and talking to someone who didn't believe the way I did. And so I finally made the decision. I'm coming out. I'm saying it. I told my husband, I told my parents, everybody had and I had no skill at doing that. Now there are books about it and podcasts and blogs about how to come out and who to tell.
That takes a lot of guts, right? Because you've got no one, you've got no support network. Your whole life, as you've said, and as we know in Bible Belt America, your whole life revolves around that, and that includes your job, your income, your family networks, everything. And then to say, and I think your grandfather was a pastor, wasn't he?
Yes,
as well?
yes.
And so, this is huge. Where do you go? Well, first of all, how did you come out to them?
Oh, it was, I my memories are fuzzy. It was so traumatic. I told my husband first, I just don't believe this. I just don't believe this anymore. It was an instant problem. And this was a solid marriage. We were partners in, we did our finances well. We did travel well. We did the children well. We did the home well. It was a solid, strong marriage. I still love him. I still care deeply for him, but it was an absolute deal breaker. I told my parents, my mother cried and said the only thing that kept her from falling apart was in the Baptist tradition, there is a concept called once saved, always saved, and being saved.
Yeah, I was going to come on to this.
Yes. So that was the only thing that gave her any hope. Because even though if I would reject it, you can't reject your salvation. Please do not even, there is not enough time to go through the philosophy of whatever the hell that means. So this once saved, always saved, my dad, who was very conventional, very of his generation, called me middle-aged crazy. Thank you. And my brothers were furious with me, so it was, and
why? What angry over what?
Why am I destroying my life? Why am I destroying my marriage? Why am I destroying my parents? Why am I hurting my parents that way? Why am I hurting Jesus that way? Why would I? And it was just, and I'll tell you, Johnny, I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard this. It seems like the first go-to reaction is anger. It's not even the grief yet. Now they may have grieved in time, but their first reaction is always anger. My friends at church, it was anger. It was not.
Well, what's happening is it's a repudiation of them.
Sure.
And it's like with politics. If you say to someone who's a dyed-in-the-wool Republican that you're a dyed-in-the-wool left-winger Democrat, or vice versa, what you're doing is in the same way that this is why people who eat meat get really annoyed with vegans who come up and say, and I say as a vegan, but I'm not evangelical or anything, but like this whole idea, I have this joke, right? That if the vegans in a cocktail party goes up to someone and says, I'm a pedophile vegan. And the other person says, what? You're a vegan? And it's like,
yes.
it's just, but it's the idea. So when you say something like, I'm a vegan, to someone who is a meat eater, what you're actually saying is, I've made a moral decision, right? That is this, and by saying that, I'm introducing that, and you are not that. So by you not being that, you have this other person has this cognitive dissonance of like some moral position that's different to mine and my position, and they're implying, or the implication is in my head that they're better than me, but they can't be better than me because I'm perfect. And so you have this cognitive dissonance that breaks the brain down. So with someone that's different politics than you or different religion than you, but then coming up and saying, I am this, is to say, I am this, and I've rejected what you hold dear.
Absolutely. And that happens in the fraction of an instant, because
Yeah,
this is your identity, whatever it is, vegan or Christian or whatever it is.
yeah.
The person telling you that they are not that, you're right, is a repudiation, and they take it personally, and that's why that's where I think the anger comes from.
Mm.
That's just the instant pushback of, well, you can't possibly believe this, there's some mistake about this, or what do you think you're doing, or you're whatever in their minds are going to be defensive about what it is I've just told them. So
Because if you're saying you are right, you are implying that I am wrong.
it's true.
Just naturally, you are that position, and both of us can't be right, so one of us is wrong here.
And particularly when it comes to religion, I don't know so much on the vegan side, but particularly when it comes to religion, that is what we're saying, Johnny. We are saying, I mean, I'm not trying to say, well, I'm an atheist, I'm a non-believer because it works for me. It's my reality. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I don't believe in any of it. And so when someone else, that's why I think that's one of the reasons that causes such a strong reaction, because there's no wiggle room. I'm not saying I'm an atheist because it doesn't work for me. The implication is I'm an atheist because this shit's not true. It's there's no wiggle room there on being like there would be with a vegan or a meat eater, whatever your reasons are for eating this way or whatever. Maybe there's some room to peacefully coexist.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But with religion, I'm not the one saying it, although by definition, if I'm saying that I don't believe in this, if I don't believe in this, it's because I don't believe in it because I don't believe it's real. So that may be a challenge.
Yeah. And so you then say this to your family, and their reaction is,
yes, it was pretty awful for a while. The divorce took forever because we did go to counseling. We did try to reconcile. I was intractable in my position. It's one of those, you can't unring that bell once you've reached this conclusion that I did. And I did try to find a way to believe in it. And then I tried to find a way of, well, if I'm not going to believe in it, how can we, what can I just go to church? Can I maybe not go to church? And there was no happy medium for us. It was unacceptable for him. It was unacceptable for me. And so that was it's still a loss. I mean, I am so happy now, and I'm in such a good place, and he's happy, and he's married to this religious lady, and he's in such a good place. But it was at the time, it was just so traumatic because we cared deeply for one another, and we were so compatible. So it was a tough time.
It's interesting. The last two people I've interviewed have both been atheists in a marriage. In fact, Tim Mills has interviewed you.
Oh, I've been on his show.
Yeah. So, and both of them, and they're very different. So one, they're both married to quite evangelical, I guess, but one's maybe a little bit more moderate, but they're in completely different places. And it's really interesting how it can be either pretty destructive as it is, and it was in your situation, or you can just about learn to adapt to each other and forgive. But it's all about the ideas are held. So for the other person, like if you're in a marriage with someone, you think that person's going to burn for eternity in hell, like my loved one is, then that's going to mess with your head.
It sure is. It is going to mess with your head. And when you're on the atheist side of it, you don't understand how they don't see it the way you see it. And so there's so much conflict and tension. I know these mixed marriages, and I know that there are a lot of them that are successful. It was beyond my skill set and the skill set of my particular spouse. I mean, maybe there are other people that can get to that happy place. I was just not one of them. I feel like we tried. I mean, we kind of tried. We just couldn't find the common ground. It was, and I could have lived with him being a religious person better than he could live with me not being a religious person, because
I can
he's the one
imagine
that
that.
initiated the legal action and we followed through with it. And I might not have done that had he been willing to just, I don't know how we would have dealt with it. And I was becoming such a different person. You know, we haven't talked about it yet, but everything changed for me when you are one of these people that has leaned into religion, and I used it as a foundation. It did affect my politics. I was a conservative person. I voted in a conservative manner. And when I walked away and left religion and lost confidence in those beliefs and began to examine everything I did embrace and how I wanted to live my life and how I wanted to manage my sexuality and how I wanted to leave a legacy and how I wanted the rest of my days to matter, because I didn't get Disneyland at the end of it. All of those things changed who I was. So I'm probably being a little cavalier in saying maybe we could have worked it out. I became a different person. And while my ex-husband and I are friends now, we wouldn't be compatible now because of what he values and how he chooses to live his life, and what I value and how I choose to live my life. So,
and I think you know, that's what you're talking about is this constraint that the cage of religion imposes upon you, like morally, politically, and everything. And once that is you are released from that, you are able to grow and be who, again, we're talking about that fundamental psychology, moral psychology again. You are able to fulfill who you would be without having the imposition of some framework upon you.
and
And
when you have never done even that beginning questioning, you know, there's that Ingersoll quote about when the shackles fall away and the walls of the cages fall away, and you boldly face all worlds, boldly face all worlds. It was for the first time when you look at societal issues, when you're inside it and you're a believer, the solution to all of that is they need Jesus and we have to pray for them. When you come out of the bubble, you've got to take it a little bit more seriously, because those are not options. No, they don't need Jesus. That's not what we're doing. And praying for them isn't going to do anything. We've got to solve problems. Whether it's in our own country or internationally, people who are suffering and in need, their solution lies with everybody else. I mean, we've all got to work together and as all of humanity to solve some of these problems. It's not, and religion ain't the answer. And so when you the magnitude, the weight of that, when you first, as you begin to dissect all of the pieces that are affected by what your belief system formerly was, it's enormous to be able to think through all of these things. Wow, I was wrong about that. Well, then how do we solve it? What do I do with that? How do I participate? What is my obligation? What is my privilege to be able to participate in that whole process? Anyway, I think I'm kind of chasing a rabbit there, but for some of us, because we took religion seriously, and religion has its little fingers in every part of your life, the ground becomes soft beneath you. The change is seismic, because nothing remains the same. Nothing about how we relate to one another before, how I related to other human people, it was always a priority to know, were they saved? Did they know Jesus? Did they have a relationship?
I remember listening to Dan Barker's book Mere Morality, and he's got a whole section in that book about the morality of the Bible, and how the Bible really concentrates on your relationship with God rather than your relationship with other human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really give you much moral guidance on how to live with other humans and treat them as you know, decent entities in the world that you're sharing. And I guess that's the thing, which is when you're living in this religious framework, I wonder whether everything's all about God, me and God, and our relationship together is kind of seen through the prism of me and God, and you and God. And so you're having to reinvent how you do human relationships and everything.
Clearly, and how you value another person. So if I met a stranger in the grocery store as a believing person, First of all, I had the obligation to share the good news. That undergirds everything. At all times, at any place, you have a responsibility to every human being with whom you have an encounter, that the blood of their soul is on your hands. And if you don't share the gospel, if you don't share the message of Christ, if they get in a car accident on the way home, it's on you. And that has been drilled into you from the beginning. So when you step away, you have this whole new context when you're in line with someone at the grocery store. And and you have these profound moments of reflection, thinking, because your mind goes there without, even after you've left, even for years after you've left religion, the context of putting another person and going that, well, I wonder what their spiritual life is like. And it takes years to discard that automatic reaction to your meeting another human being. Is okay, well, let's wonder who this now it's I wonder who this person is and what their story is and where they came from and how they are, instead of, does this person know Jesus?
And this is all to do with that very destructive concept of hell. And admittedly, not all religious people have the same, or not all Christians have the same concept of hell. And there are very different flavors of Christianity, from universalism to annihilationism to eternal conscious torment. But if you believe in eternal conscious torment, then I understand that, of course, every human being you meet is a potential to experience the worst thing that the human mind can possibly
And it's
conceive.
on you, and it is on you. Every person you meet, their salvation is on you, because as if no one has heard the story of as if no one has heard what religion has to offer. That was, it was like, you may be the only person that shows them Jesus. And it's like, nope, no, they see it all the time.
Yeah, but you kind of understand that they might, that kind of witnessing is obligatory because of the ramifications of not doing that.
Completely.
It's literally
Completely.
because, I mean, I talk about this like the carrot and stick of religion, which it has the sweetest carrot that you can possibly imagine in human conception. Like, whatever you think of heaven, it's the greatest thing you can think of. And if you can think of something greater than that, then that would be heaven, right? So there is nothing greater than heaven in human conception. And likewise with hell, there is no greater stick, because if you can imagine a worse stick than hell, then that is hell. And so with these twin bribes, emotional blackmail sitting on your shoulder, not only does it completely poison or like insidiously invade your own moral judgments, because you end up doing things just so you can get to heaven and avoid hell, like always at the back of your kind of
And I'll
moral
tell you that
calculations.
that dichotomy helped me, because everybody retains this fear of hell, even after, I mean, not everybody, but uh, and we'll talk about this when we talk about recovering from religion. That's
Well, Tim talked about this. Yeah, this is a
a
big
big
thing for him
fear,
still.
big fear of hell that we hang on to. We hang on to. There's psychological reasons behind all of that. But when I was deconverting, I was not ready to let go of heaven. I had had some beloved
Mm.
friends and grandparents who had died, and I had not said a final goodbye to them. I hadn't even fully grieved them, because, okay, well, he's gone for now, but we'll see him again. We'll see him again. I didn't want to let that go. I loved these people. I wanted to see them again. Heaven, I wanted to be there. And the way I was able to make that acceptance and come to a peace about that was to say, yes, I'm losing heaven. I've got to grieve these people permanently. I've got to go through it all again, because I'm not going to see them again. But the trade-off was, when I let that go, then I can let go of hell. I can let go of the other
Mm.
side. And so it was a literal balancing out of going, yes, I'm losing the big thing, but oh
It's a
my
good
God,
way.
I'm also ditching the other big thing. So it helped me. It was what gave me a
Yeah.
springboard to be able to let it go.
That's an interesting way of seeing that. Actually, I like that, because yeah, hell is just such a problematic. I mean, it just makes no sense. Don't get me started philosophically on it, but there you go. Uh, so we're at you sort of leaving religion. You've told your parents, your family and friends. I guess your children are off somewhere else, also non-religious. Do your friends and family know that what their beliefs are?
Yes, yes, and it was that was also
And that's
kind of
your fault, right?
that is, it was all my fault. And now I'll take all the credit. No, it was not. These are independent children, and they certainly came to the conclusion on their own. And in fact, the joke is my children are the ones that led me out. I didn't drag them. They dragged me kicking and screaming. I was the tail end Charlie because I was so much more vested than they were. They were launching. They were going to college. They were going to start their lives. They were all in various stages of free thinkers. They had all
Mm.
rejected it by the time they went away to college. Sometimes, for a couple of them, it was the journey was in college. Also, it took it takes a
Yeah.
while
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
So they were ready, and I was I was the one who was stuck. So I have kind of a we call that the dark period. I had that hard time going through, telling my family, coming out, losing my entire support group. No one, I had from the minute that I said I don't believe this anymore. Every friend I had that I would have considered, they we saw one another through deaths and births, and we would what I were what I would consider close friends gone. It
Mm.
was the thing we've already addressed, the fear and the anger of my rejecting what they identified with. It
Mm.
was also there's also this I'll tell you, there's this sort of tough love mentality in some evangelical churches, and I could have, and I know because I was on the inside of it. Sometimes when someone would be off sinning and someone's having an affair somewhere, or someone's doing a bad thing, the response of the church is, "We're going to embrace them when they're ready to be forgiven and they're ready to ask for forgiveness. We'll bring them back, but until then, we're gonna do this tough love. You withdraw this in Jehovah's Witness and Mormonism. There's other religions that actually have a term for it, the disfellowshipping part, you
Mm.
know, and evangelical churches don't use that word and they don't make it as formal a policy, but they do the same thing.
Mm.
So I knew that my girlfriends were behind the scenes saying, "Oh, we love her so much and we're going to pray for her. And when she's ready to come back and say, 'Oh, I was wrong about everything,' we will embrace her." But up to that point, we're going to tough love her. Eh.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what did you do then? You are now kind of out on your own. You
Yep.
have no real support network yet, as far as I
Yes.
understand it.
Yes. And here's what I did. Here's the way I responded, Johnny. First of all, I held close to my children, because they were off making progress too. So we're kind of on this parallel track, and I appreciated them working through with me this whole process that we were doing together. It was virtual. They're off. They all left to go to college. They didn't stay in our same town. So this was all. Just kept them close. I let them know what I was going through and what I was doing. I As I said, early stages of the internet. So I was learning and learning and learning. I started I was in the Middle Tennessee area at the time. I found a group of atheists in Nashville, which was about an hour's drive from where I lived. And I would go to their social events, their evenings in the pub. And then I started one in my small town. There wasn't one in my small town. And I thought, now there is, because
Yeah.
I made it up. I did that. I found where atheist activism was. I went to an American atheist convention by myself. Didn't know a soul. I
Wow.
took off and went and attended it because I needed to be around. I was thriving being around other free thinking people, the Nashville Atheist Group, and then my little small town group. And we would meet at a pub. We would meet at my house. It was
And I
it
suppose, in
was
a sense, that's like quite exciting, but it's quite subversive, isn't it? So if everyone around you is in some big church group, it's like being in the French Resistance or something.
Oh,
Like there
we
must
were
be some sort
so
of
badass.
puissance.
It was
There's
oh, it was so empowering, and it was so, you gotta go through the baggage. You gotta go through the anger, and then you gotta mock the religion. And everybody in some context goes through that. So you've
Mm.
made this decision. I just don't have confidence in the belief anymore. You have these things happening simultaneously. You have grief. You're grieving your community. You're grieving the loss that is a legitimate emotion. You're losing an eternal parent, a parent who thought who created you, who loved you, who sent a child to die for you. So you're losing this eternal parent. You're losing a plan for your life, someone some entity that's guiding and directing you. Those in the beginning, until you can cross that Rubicon, those are a loss. And it's an emotional loss, because I don't in the middle of the night when I'm afraid, no one cares. No one God-wise cares. There's no one I can turn to. There's no one I can pray to. When I'm grateful, I'm lonely, because I'm grateful and I want to say thank you to somebody.
Yeah, that's really
So
interesting.
so there are some simultaneous emotions that are going on when you leave, that being around other people who are on a same or similar journey is profound. To be
Yeah.
able to, like, all these things I've just shared with you in perspective, Johnny, I can look back and I can describe it exactly what was happening. But at the time, my little heart was in so many different places, because I was grieving, but I was joyful, but I was angry, but I was looking forward to the future. All of this is happening at one time.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it is the best of times. It was the worst of times, because you've got a lot of in the losses column, and you've got a lot in the pro column, the gain column, and you're having to come to terms with it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so now on this side, years on this side, I mean, it's easy for me to say how much happier I am, how much better life is, not because my circumstances are different, although they are, not because my environment is so different, although it is, but because my mentality changed from being that religious mentality that has so much fear and so much guilt and so much resistance to conformity, or fighting the conflict of trying to conform with my natural human nature, that I was having to put in a box and discard anyway.
Well, so actually, that's really interesting, because that gets on to something I was going to bring up, which is, you've said before that there's so much more light, air, and space in your life now, and I
Huh.
wanted you to just unpick that for me. But before you do that, Daniel's asked this, because actually this is kind of similar to things you were just talking about, and how you've having to reprogram yourself. In other ways, for Gail, was it hard to deprogram yourself from prayer? Because you were talking about how you'd pray. As a Christian, obviously you pray tonight, or give at night, or whenever, and you give thanks, or you do this, and without that, suddenly you don't have this invisible friend or comfort blanket or entity to go to. How did you cope with that?
Oh, Daniel, such a good question. And for me, I didn't know I was doing it at the time. But for me, when I would have those urges, when I'm feeling grateful, or I'm in awe and I'm having this moment, and all, I tell a particular story, and I will answer that question, I promise. I'm going to chase this rabbit for just 1 second. When I was a believer, I made a trip to Arches National Park in Utah. It's a gorgeous place, gorgeous. And I remember, as a believer, looking at it and just being so humble. God has done this handiwork. It's just beautiful. The colors and the sun and the shapes and the formation. And I remember just being moved years later. And when I went to Arches National Park near Moab, Utah, as a non-believer, and I stood there and I thought of the millennia of wind and water and the sand, and how this became this because of all of the forces that acted on it. The feeling was so much more profound. When I had the feeling with the God moment, God just waved his magic wand and bring, here it is for you. But when I
And
looked at
actually,
it as a non-believer,
that's literally philosophically as simple as a thing you can do, right? If God is omnipotent, then actually that takes virtually
nothing. It's Harry
that takes
Potter.
no
It's
thought.
Harry
It's nothing.
Potter.
It's just like,
Bling, and there it is. Yes. And
so
so when
really
I
good
was
point.
yes. So when I was having these moments of whatever it was, being thankful or being sad or thinking about someone else or being grateful, or any of the things that send your mind right into prayer, right into wanting to converse with your invisible friend, with this presence that you've always had. I didn't know I was doing it then. I can look back and see that I was doing it now. I would stop and let myself have the moment. Okay, what am I? I'm praying for somebody. Let's say I've heard some bad news about somebody. Somebody's got cancer, and my instinct is to pray, is to go for it. Is I would stop myself and go, okay, what is happening to me? I can't help this person by praying for them, but I feel moved to do that. What else can I do? Can I make a meal for the person? Can I reach out to them? Can I make a phone call? Because what I'm feeling compassion and empathy for this person that's struggling. And
And a lack of
and I
control,
want to,
possibly.
yes, lack of control, and I want to help. That was the main feeling, is want to help. So instead of, God, there's nothing that I can do about it, please help this person, please heal this person, I would redirect it into going, okay, there's no God that can help this person. I care about this person. I feel like I would like to help. What can I possibly do to help? And that's kind of a long and drawn out process that happened over and over again, instantly, as I would turn in prayer to God, and I would redirect it and turn it into the humanist version of caring about someone and feeling like you want to help.
That brilliant. A really, really good answer. Thank you. VA, thanks for being. Vaguely Agnostic is a member of the channel, so thank you for him. To him, it's amazing how so many people. This goes back to the idea of like friends rejecting you. It's amazing how so many people you shared such intense experiences with simply just disappear.
It is amazing to me too, VA. It's amazing to me because those were genuine experiences. I still to this day believe those were genuine experiences.
Mm,
When they brought a meal to me when I was sick, or I brought a meal to them when they had a death in the family, that was real. That was based, yes, religion was the foundation of what the relationship was, but I did care about these people. I cared about them suffering. I cared about their sorrow. I wanted to make an effort to help them. And they, I believe, had a genuinely authentic experience back toward me. And so for it to have vanished, it was traumatic. It was jarring, because those relationships vanished so quickly, so many of them so quickly, and so instantly.
mm. Question: did you kick yourself for not realizing it all sooner? I wish I'd done it 20 plus years ago.
Oh my goodness, yes, I agree with you, Melody Joy. I wish I had too. I think about my kids are kind to me, and when we get together and we rant about religion or one thing or another, they are so my children, of course, like everybody's, they were the most important things in my life, and I exposed them to this. I put them in this, and as I look back and I think of those wasted years where we could have been doing anything but going to church or experiencing what we experienced, and I feel overwhelmed over, God, why did it take me so long? Why did they have to wait until they were teenagers to figure this out? They are so forgiving and so kind, and they say, even, Mom, had we not had this, we wouldn't have known what religion was all about in the first place, and its power over people. And right now we know that. We know it on a personal level. So we know that experience, and we know where people are when they're struggling with it, and we can actually help by saying, oh yeah, I know what that feeling is like. And the second thing is, it gives them such a broad understanding of what's going on socially and politically in our country. They know the power of religion, and they all say that, yes, we wish we had done something different, and sure, we could have done different things with our time, but they're grateful for having had the experience, because it has given them insight that otherwise they wouldn't have.
Mm.
That they're letting me off the hook. And I'm grateful for that. But and there's some truth
They're
to it.
just trying
But
to. Every cloud has a silver lining. Let's just
that's right.
concentrate on the silver lining and
That's right. That's right.
forget
So
the big
yes, I
gray
wish I
area.
had done it years before, because then when you get to that point, and as I said, you see what life can be, that it's not inside this little tiny box on this little tiny narrow path. Oh, I see that. Yes, yes. She said that she hopes her kids thank her someday for not indoctrinating them very much. I think they will. I think they absolutely will. But yes, I wish I had done it years earlier.
So we've got to this situation where you have extricated yourself from religion. You are starting to find yourself. You're starting to find similar, like-minded people, which is hugely important. You need to feel like you're a part of a community for sure. Um, where to next?
So, well, my story, was accompanied by what was happening in my personal life, and I knew that the divorce was coming. My children were grown, leaving, grown up, and I decided all those things together. I had a long lifetime dream of going to law school, so that's what I did. I went back to law school. I went to law school, not back to law school. I went to law school right it was in the middle of the divorce. It was after my deconstruction, and I kind of threw myself into it. It was a dream. It was something that I wanted to do, but it was also terribly much of a distraction and a place where I could focus all my
Mm.
creative thought and my energy and my time, because not only was I having this whole empty nest, because I'm now faced with my, okay, kids are grown now what, but the deconstruction was on top of that. And so I went to law school. So law school served to me as sort of the bridge into my new life. And alongside that is when I became much, I deconstructed my politics and I became politically active in my community. I was plugging into what I call the secular universe, finding where areas that I could plug in, so to speak, and find a community, socialize and find a community. I was doing that on a local level with my small
contribute, I
group.
suppose. Yeah.
Yes, and contribute too, of course, because I wanted to do that. It's part of my psyche, is that I do want to be involved in that. I do want to feel like I'm making a difference. Maybe that's a holdover from religion. I don't know. I like being engaged like that on
Once
the
a
local
Sunday
and
school teacher, always a Sunday school
well,
teacher.
that's a good way to say it, Johnny. That's absolutely the way to say it.
So there you are, and then so your bridge into your new life is you're becoming an attorney,
Uh-huh.
which you still are,
Uh-huh.
and how where did recovering from religion come along? We had earlier on, and I hope he's still there, but I don't know if he still is. Daryl Ray popped in to
Yes,
say
he
hello.
texted me. He had to pop off, so
Oh,
he's no longer with us. But Daryl and I, yes, met at an early American Atheist Convention that I attended. I met him and I just fell in love with him. He's just all that. He's such a remarkable person. And he had the idea and started recovering from religion in 2009, and he and I met in 2011. So it wasn't even hardly a thing. And we had a friendship for over the years. And then the opportunity presented itself that they needed a new executive director in 2015. And I thought, of all places for me to be able to plug into the secular community, recovering from religion was not then what it is now, but I knew the concept. I knew what the idea was, that it's a place and a resource for people who are deconstructing all at the 35,000 foot level. That's what recovering from religion was. And I thought, oh my God, this is totally me. This is my skill set. I've got the organizational piece, and I have the personal experience piece, and I know the impact and how much better my life has been because I've stepped away from this oppressive system. So I started in January of 2016 as the executive director of Recovering from Religion, and it has been. I don't want to be melodramatic, and I am an attorney, and I do important attorney things that are profound. But my experience with recovering from religion has been among the most gratifying moments of my life. It is, if you can imagine my experience coupled with what recovering from religion tries to do and what we offer to people and how we want to provide hope, healing, and support to them. It was just, it has worked on both sides of it. It has worked profoundly for me. And I think that recovering from religion has thrived, and it's just been an utter joy to be part of.
so it's interesting here at the top, the ribbon at the top said, would you like to chat with an agent? Just click the green chat bubble, the bottom of the page. We try to offer a 24-hour service and strive to respond within a few minutes. So that's incredible that you actually offer that
Yes,
kind
and
of
if you
service.
see in the corner down at the bottom of the page is the little chat bubble. And if you were to click on that, you can click on it. It just opens a window where there's a trained volunteer. Recovering from Religion is entirely volunteer staffed. A trained volunteer is right now, as we're speaking, Johnny, is behind the scenes on the other side of it, waiting to have a conversation. You can click on the bubble. It won't activate anything. And you can show that it'll pop up just a little. There you go. Welcome, start chat to continue. So that's on every page of the website. But you'll also see, as you're scrolling through that you can also make a phone call, or you can find a group to attend, or you can schedule a phone call. That is all part of what Recovering from Religion offers. As you scroll down more, you're seeing that professional support. All of the things that we do above that line are peer support, the calls, the chats. Mhm.
secular therapy project.
Uh-huh.
One of my good friends is Dr. Caleb Lack, and he's
Oh,
been
he
involved
was the
with that.
he was the director of the Secular Therapy Project for a while. That's sort of literal. The Secular Therapy
Yeah.
Project is it's professional therapy. And what it's a database of therapists who have been vetted to ensure that they only provide evidence-based therapy. There's Dr. Ray right there. And so when a client reaches out to the Secular Therapy Project and puts in their parameters of what they might need and how far they're willing to travel, what kind of help they need, then we marry that with our vetted secular therapists so that you don't end up in the office of someone who tells you that you're having a spiritual problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Brilliant. And so, so you then started working with Daryl, and
Uh-huh.
I presume other people
Yes.
to bring this to fruition.
Yes. Yes. We
And
have a fabulous board of directors. Daryl is the president of the founder and the president of the board, and we have all of our members of the board of directors are working within the organization. They're volunteers in the organization too. Every single one of them. Not only are they financial contributors, but they are 100% volunteers in the organization. And our volunteers, as you can expect, there are scores and scores of volunteers because we have continuous. We try, as the banner said, we try to have this 24 hours a day. So we have people in other time zones. I see one of our volunteers is chiming in here that we're always looking for volunteers. There's a tab at the top of the website that we take you through the whole process. We provide the training, we provide the mentor support, we prepare you for whatever it is that your skill set is. Sometimes it's not being an agent, sometimes it's working with social media, or it's being part of the technical part of what we do. Whatever it is, whatever your skill set is, however you'd like to volunteer with us, we would love to embrace you as a member of our volunteer family. As you can see, yes. So it's just, I know that every nonprofit likes to brag about its volunteers, but I will tell you that when you see the work that our folks are doing behind the scenes, Johnny, when you see them take a chat of someone who's typing in, I am falling apart. Everything that I thought I believed, I don't believe anymore. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't have anybody to talk to. And our volunteers are trained. We're not a deconversion process. We're not trying to drag you out of religion. We're not telling you what to believe. We're trying to give you the skills to know how to determine what you believe. We're trying to give you some social support. We might have a support group in your area. You might want to come in and join our online community and talk to other people that have a Mormon background or a Jehovah's Witness background or a military background, whatever your corner of the universe is. Everything that we have developed at Recovering from Religion has grown organically out of the need, out of our desire to answer the question, how can we help? What is it we can provide as you're going on this journey that, as we've already identified in the beginning, is terrifying and also sometimes very sad because of the fractured relationships and the all of the costs that it's going to impose when you leave your faith, as we've talked through.
yeah, and I guess, well, I suppose you've had to have a crash course or a slow learning process, I don't know, in psychology,
Sure.
in understanding people's needs, the function. The psychology of religion for me is a fascinating topic. So I came at all this like from a philosophical point of view and background, but it didn't take me very long to realize that, do you know what, I can argue to toss about the content of religious belief, right? And I can talk about this biblical, I can write books on the nativity and the resurrection and all that, but it's all a load of bollocks, really, because because basically people don't believe because of those things. People believe for psychological reasons. So if I want to unpick their belief and try and disabuse them of the notion of the existence of God, then I need to understand the function that God is providing for them. And likewise, if you are helping people to recover from religion, you need to understand what the function that God and religion has in their life to be able to understand what they will be lacking and the challenges they will be having
And
in leaving
fortunately
religion.
for us, the president of the board, Dr. Darrell Ray, is a psychologist. So he comes equipped with all that. And not only that, because of his background and because of the outgrowth and the formation of the Secular Therapy Project, we have access to actual therapists who guide. When I say that we don't on the helpline, and we don't deconvert people, but we also, this is all peer support. We don't provide advice. We're not therapists, and we make that crystal clear. But there may come a time in someone's life when they need that little bit, that extra help, or that help that only can come from a therapist. But our secular therapists are able to guide us as we develop our training program for our volunteers in exactly what you just identified, Johnny. What is it? How did they get here? What's going on in their brain? And we even know down to the electrical impulse level of what religion does inside someone's brain. And they can, and our therapists who are so well trained and so well educated in that can share with us and say, okay, and we can say, okay, as peers, what can we provide? How can we help them? And our training is wrapped around that kind of thing, where we ask questions that make them reflect on their own situation. We try to point them in the direction of resources that will help them develop their critical thinking skills. We provide you, as we were looking at it a minute ago, you were looking at our resources. We have thousands of resources of books and podcasts and blogs and websites of what is your need? Maybe it's parenting. How in the hell am I going to raise children to be moral if Jesus, if they're not in Sunday school? Well, guess what? There's resources for that. So we try to take someone when they come into the helpline and they type in, I'm falling apart, I don't know what to do. We take them as they are. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about that. And what do you mean by that? And what do you see as your options are? Those kinds of things.
So please help me. I've just relinquished my belief in God, and I'm getting a taste for eating babies. Well,
Do you have a recipe book?
Yeah. It's like, no, that's not what happens.
That's not exactly
so what are then the really common challenges that people leaving religion have? What do you most often see and have to help with?
Sure. Well, I've alluded to this. Sometimes when I present on recovering from religion, I ask the audience that question: what do you think is the main reason? And most people, they say, fear of hell. And that is a really good guess. And it's really up there in the top, because even rational people who've been away from the beliefs for a number of years still have this primal feeling in their brain of, what if I'm wrong? And what if I'm a burn in hell? But that is not the number one reason. And it won't surprise
I'm going to guess. Is it relationships?
Yes, the fractured relationships, whether that's in your social community, your church, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your siblings or your parents or your children, whatever it is, those affect us. Though we're not okay when those relationships break. And sometimes the break is unfixable.
Because that's what's most important in our lives anyway, isn't it? Like,
of course,
if you're thinking everything's about, what do these other people think about me, or how do I help them, or what do all the people around me, how do I parent my kids?
Sure. And you want to please them, and you want them to be happy, and all of those things factor into. Now, when I say that I don't believe this anymore, every bit of that, every bit of that is affected by you saying that statement. And so, yes, because
you are being rejected as a non-religious person, in the same way we talked about this earlier about it's repudiation to the other side, but then that other person, so for example your husband in that scenario,
yes.
This is armchair psychoanalyzing you, Gail, so please correct me when I get it very wrong, but your husband is going to be saying, well, actually no, I reject you. Because I reject your beliefs and therefore I reject you, which is okay. Me as a human, the totality of who I am as a human being has just been rejected. And that's really obviously about as hard a thing to take, which is like the person who's closest to me in the universe, right, has just turned around and said, everything about me is wrong now. And bang, that's just massive. That's like a 180 flip.
It's happened to both people, because the rejector is feeling that way, and the rejectee is feeling that way. So yes, fractured relationships are, and here's the thing. That's That's valid. We can't go, oh,
Mm.
that's fine. Everything will be fine, because it's not everything's going to be fine. Sometimes those relationships heal over. My relationship with my parents and my brothers, they healed over, but that is scar tissue under there, and we don't go there.
Mm.
We don't dig that deep, because it's not going to be okay there. And we as humans have an uncanny ability to be able to do that, to be able to build that tissue back, as long as we don't.
Compartmentalize as well. Yeah,
Yes, we just don't. We're not going to touch on that. We're going to touch on other things. So those fractured relationships, that's a very serious thing. And both the bad news and the good news is, we've got some news for you. Yes, that may affect those relationships now going forward, because yes, you have a different set of beliefs, and not just a set of beliefs, but a whole different set of goals and desires for who you are and what you want to be. Imagine a member of the LGBTQ community coming to the understanding of who they are and embracing who they are. And imagine that fracture in an evangelical household. That is forever. I mean, it's not, regardless of what the behavior is around anybody, fundamentally, just the belief itself is now going to be a fracture that can't be fixed unless the religious person comes to the side of the member of the LGBTQ community, because they're who they are. This is who they are. This is what we understand about what sexual identity is. And so it's
so
hard.
with you and your parents, like, have they moved towards you at all, like in understanding, in progressiveness, or have they, do they know everything you do now and all the work you do? Like, you're not just an atheist, you are like big time involved.
Sure. We have, the way you said it, Johnny, mattered to me. Yes, they have moved. Yes, they have moved as far as understanding. They haven't moved as far as belief. They have moved
No.
closer as to understanding,
Yeah.
because I'm willing to share about it anytime they let me. I would tell them everything if I wanted to, but I have given them information. It's kind of like raising children. You give them the information that they're asking for at the time. So when my dad's in the throes of late Alzheimer's, so he's sort of out of the picture at this point. But my mother, when she'll ask a question, I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm not going to go into my 10 reasons for not believing in God, or, I give her, because I want to build that relationship. I care deeply for her, and I want to be as positive as I can about when she asks me those questions, about genuinely building the relationship. I don't want to make it better or worse than it is. I want to be as genuine as I can when she asks me the question about, sometimes she'll ask me, not very often, not terribly curious, but sometimes she'll ask me, what do you think about heaven or hell? And I'll say, I don't think there's a lot of evidence. I don't think there's any evidence for those things. Could there be something after life? Sure. Let's say sure. We don't have any evidence for that, and we have a lot of evidence that when we die, our brain is gone with its memories and personality, and pretty straightforward. I'd love for there to be something else, and if there's evidence for that, sure. Anyway.
I see. I'm straight away, because I've just written a book called 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God, Heaven, Hell, Satan, and Divine Design, which is basically all about those kind of things.
Sure.
One of the chapters is about who are we when we get to heaven, right? And just talk about your father there. I'm sorry to exemplify him here, and it might be uncomfortable, but someone with Alzheimer's is obviously in a very different place mentally than they were 5 years ago. But when they die and go to heaven, like, are they there with Alzheimer's, just walking around cognitively impaired?
One of the most profound things that had an effect on me, and this was early in my deconstruction, was some interview with a woman, and it was about non-belief or belief, and the interviewer was asking her, your son is not a believer and you are, and so when you get to heaven, he won't be there and he's not coming. How will that make you feel? And this mother, and I'm sure she was a good mother, and I'm sure she loved her child, but her answer was, well, I won't know it. It wasn't the fact that her kid was going to be burning in hell was not that was not what was at forefront of her mind. The forefront of her mind was, well, she wouldn't know about it. And it was like,
I'm all right, Jack.
Oh, right. this was one of those flashes of humanism that occurred to me. And I thought, if I were a Christian person, I would go, that's right, we won't know about that. All of that will pass away, because in heaven we'll be in God's presence. And then I stopped myself short, because now I'm on the deconstruction side, and I'm like, that is obscene. That is, she is not that kind of a mother. I'm sure she cared about her kid, but the idea that that was her answer to that question uh, moved me.
It's interesting as well, because and this is kind of connected to what we're saying now, but also to what you said earlier about salvation. And sorry to my regular viewers who have heard me quote this before, but this is a quote from a pastor who was my friend Neil Sendlak, who is Gnostic Informant on YouTube. And he's like, oh yeah, and we're talking about heaven and hell and whatnot, and he's saying, oh, my pastor said this, and here's a video clip of him saying it. This was what was recorded when I was in the church of him saying this, and this is what he said. Not that I would ever do this, but if you gave me an AK-47 right now with enough ammo to take you all out, and before I did it, I started blaspheming the Holy Ghost name and then took you out and then put the gun in my mouth, I still end up in heaven. Sorry, that probably wouldn't happen, as before I got to do it, the Lord would stop me. He might take me out before I got my finger on the trigger, but that's the power of the salvation. It's all the work of the Lord, which is a kind of idea that, like, he's imagined this truly terrible thing, and like, but the worst thing is actually taking the Holy Ghost name in vain. worse than shooting everyone else. Like, oh, and by the way, and I swore like this as well. But he
Right.
does all this terrible stuff, but he's still saved. And that's how, as you're saying, this is how whether it be your parents or whoever, can justify you leaving the religion. It's all right, she was a Christian, she
Right.
is saved.
Right. Right.
Kind of
Right.
forgives everything.
And it certainly looks different on each side of the divide. When you're on the religious side of it, that's, of course, that's what it is. That's what it is. And then when you're on this side, you look back and you see how destructive and negative those things can be, and how they do. Daryl has been such a help to me. And by the way, I am sure he would come talk about religious trauma if you ever had an opportunity to interview him. But he has helped
Oh
me so
goodness,
much.
put in a good word. I'd love to speak to him. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he would love to. He would love to. But he's helped me so much to see how damaging those ideas can be, how they're so counter to what our innate natural compassion is. It subverts that. It completely, when we find someone who is suffering, our natural humanism, is to try to alleviate that suffering, or to determine what's causing the suffering. But our training as believers is pray for that person, and the suffering is not as important as whether or not they know Jesus as their Savior, and that's
I remember,
damaging.
there's this idea like, only humans can solve human problems. And this idea that, if you've got issues with anyone, like whether it be climate change or someone's mental challenges that they're having with leaving religion, or any kind of psychological situations, like, well, how do we solve this? Like, just giving up on that and saying, oh, gotta sort it out,
Right.
doesn't solve anything. It's a really lazy kind
It's
of
very lazy, and
attitude.
it blunts your access to your humanity. If you constantly, every time you, as a child, and as you're developing these skills, and as you have this compassion, it's blunted and it's blunted and it's blunted, because that's not what you're supposed to. That's not your focus. Your focus is what is the nature of their salvation, what is their spiritual journey, and it becomes such a practice. I think it makes you so callous toward other people's suffering.
Perhaps it stops your moral reasoning. I mean, I could get into philosophy of divine command theory and all this kind of stuff, but the whole idea of religious morality appears to be, just broadly speaking, divine command theory. It's right because God's commanded it, and that's it.
Right.
But then you're like, oh, in that case, what part does moral reasoning play? This is bad because, and I can investigate why it might be bad and the impact it has on people and why it does harm, and the idea of suffering. Whereas if you say it's bad because God said it's bad, gets you nowhere, which is
Gets
kind
you
of what
nowhere.
you're talking about. It's that blunting of both inquiry, but the ability, or it doesn't facilitate you becoming a moral, like, actor, trying to work out how to make life better for someone else, and how to become this moral agent. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think that's another big change in people's lives. The morality piece of it, because what is your criteria as a believer? Well, it's what the Bible says, or it's whatever your particular church says, or your denomination, or wherever it is you are. That thing we talked about earlier, you don't have to struggle with what's right and wrong. You don't have to work it out and try to research and try to have an understanding. It is what it is. In the evangelical church, homosexuality is wrong. Done, finished, move on. And
Or
it
even if you don't know, I guess you just go and ask your pastor, and then they
just
tell
go
you,
ask your pastor,
like,
and they
oh,
tell
I
you
can't
what
work it out. Ask them, and they've obviously got like conduit to God.
That's right. And they tell you what your position is on that. So
Mm.
yeah, and so there comes, there's a responsibility that comes along with that. That's why of all the things that change when you go through this whole process. I remember when I was a believer, and my husband and I, for years and years, we contributed to our church. It's what you do. You tithe. You do the
Tithing. Yeah.
10%. Yes. And we were we were fervent believers. We were so engaged in that. We did it as a bank deduction. It came right out of the account. We never even saw it. It didn't come into the bank. It came in, it went out. We never even saw it. And
Direct
so
debit. Yeah.
so when and we never questioned it. It was just never questioned. So after the divorce, and when I was on my own and I had my own revenue and income and had to make a decision, oh my God, who do I give money to? Well, do I have to give money? No, I don't guess you have to. Philosophically, should I? Yeah, probably. Well, how am I going to do it? That Who knew that was going to be a thing? It took me months, and it was a joyful process for me to figure out, okay, now how much am I going to give, and who am I going to give it to, and what's my criteria? And now I have this elaborate
I can
system that I've
imagine
got
that
all.
that's empowering and it's exciting.
It's very exciting for me to say, then to have a little bit in reserve because things come up. Someone needs help for something, or there's a new opportunity. Speaking of fundraisers, Recovering from Religion is having a fundraiser. And so I want to have a little bit where I can contribute there because I know what they're doing is important and I know how to, who knew that was going to be a thing?
I got quite into a couple of years ago. This Kiva is the company I was using, or the organization,
Yes,
and it's
the
called
KIVA, where you do the animal
Mike.
livestock thing. Mhm.
Well, it's anything. So it's micro lending. I think it's called micro
That's right,
lending,
the
where,
loans.
where basically they
Yep.
loan at really low rates, and you contribute to that, and then it gets paid back if they can pay it back and whatnot. Occasionally, you get someone that can't, but basically, you lend your money out, and it helps people to, like, I need to buy crops for my farm in Ecuador or something like
Oh,
this, and
wow.
and so it's not like you're not giving money away, but it's like you're giving it to these ethical lenders who then lend the money out for like zero interest or whatever, so that someone can enrich their lives with whatever way, maybe put solar panels on their roof, or like have a fresh water like pipe to their house, or whatever they need to do in all around the world. And they do that, and then they pay you back, and then you get the money back, and then you lend it out again. And so it's this really sort of in between, like, charity and economics, but in this way that's like really quite exciting, because you look down at all these different people who like are applying, and you say, what's my criteria? So you can set it up by women, or by families, or by eco stuff, or by country, or whatever, all these different categories. You're like, what is important to me at the moment? Well, it's this in this area of the world, and it's women, and it's education, and it's this, and then, like, so that's going to be my
And
my
Johnny, look how
loan.
enthusiastic and
Yeah.
how informed you are about what that is. It's a privilege and an honor as well as a responsibility to do that kind of thing. Where before it just goes to the church and it's over and it's finished. And this is the difference of being on this side of the whole thing, is being engaged in your own life and making your life have the meaning that you want it to have. And
it's yeah
it's so
it's
many things like that.
Is this what? So I mentioned earlier that you talked about, and I don't know if you've kind of said this already in all the things you've said, but you talk about there's so much more light, air, and space, and I just wanted you to just see if you could express that
You
in
know,
or
uh,
explain that.
that someone made a meme out of that. I didn't even know when I was saying it. That wasn't something that I had structured ahead of time to be able to say. I was trying to describe. It was with Seth Andrews. We all know Seth from the Thinking Atheist, and he was doing a video, and I was trying to come up with how I describe what that
I
feels
saw
like.
that today. That's where I got that. I saw it from that.
Yes. And I was trying to, because that is my feeling, is that I didn't know I was in a dark place. I didn't know I was in a restricted place. But when you get on this side of it and you look back and you feel, what am I feeling now? What is the difference? And it's because there is more light, air, and space. There's more light to see what the world is like. There's more space to be who you truly are. There's more air for you to decide the meaning that your life is going to have. And so that's as genuine a description of how it feels having left religion to being a free thinker. I will tell you, it takes a while to get there. It didn't happen overnight. It was an arduous process, as we've talked about. There was a lot that accompanied that. There was a divorce, and there was a loss of relationships and community, and I had to rebuild all that. And now, years back, I can't imagine living any other way. But I think we do our Christian brothers and sisters a disservice if we minimize that, if we diminish that there is grieving that you go through, there is trauma and turmoil to go through. There are people who make a decision not to do it, not to come out. It's not that you can't decide what you're going to believe and not going to believe. Remember, that's not a conscious, okay, today I'm going to believe this, but not.
I can bore you with what the philosophical term for that is. So it's called doxastic voluntarism. So doxastic voluntarism is the idea that you can choose what to believe. So if I said to you, hey, the moon is made of cheese, right? You couldn't go, you literally couldn't just go, okay, I'm now going to believe that. I'm now going to believe the moon is made of cheese, because you can't. Like, there's an evidential threshold that you don't really have control over. Your non-conscious brain is dictating that, where you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, now I believe. Like, so if I gave you shed loads of evidence and like brainwashed you over a month about the moon being made of cheese, at some point you might go, oh, okay, I think I believe now. But you can't like make yourself believe. So that's doxastic voluntarism. I can't voluntarily change my beliefs. Anyway, sorry.
I'm not gonna memorize that word. I'm gonna call you. Say you can't unring that bell. When you've examined the beliefs and they fail to rise to the level of evidence that would convince you. It fails to rise to the level of evidence that would convince you. There's nothing you can make yourself lower your standards for evidence once you've looked at that and looked at it that way. Yeah.
So let's think positively about religion for a second. What about your religious upbringing are you actually thankful for? Is there any positive aspect to your religious upbringing that you?
I mentioned this, something that my children has said to me, and this is a little bit of a backdoor compliment to religion, because it's not really a compliment. And that is, I was grateful for having been brought up in religion, because it gives me insight into what is going on in our country and what goes on in the lives of people who are struggling. If I hadn't had it firsthand, I would have read all of this, I would have an understanding of it, but it wouldn't have been personal. It's one of the reasons that I do what I do at Recovering from Religion, is because it doesn't take very much for me to put myself in that frame of mind and know what that's like, to try to conform to that very narrow way of being and doing and acting. And so that fuels me to want to continue to do what I do at Recovering from Religion. So that's not much of a grateful for religion for that.
Well, it's one of these questions, like you go for a job interview and they say, what's one of your, what do you really struggle with? Or what's one of your negative like personality traits? And you go, I'm a perfectionist. I just like doing things. I just do things too well sometimes. Like,
sometimes I go to the gym too much. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, how can I turn a negative into a proper positive here?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So yes. And I saw that list. I have heard you ask that question on other podcasts about, what is the takeaway? What is the positive takeaway? When I say things like, well,
have you done your research?
I've done a little bit of my research. I wouldn't have just jumped in here, Johnny, without knowing what I was going to be facing, because sometimes you never know. No, and it's a good question to ask yourself. It's a good thing to reflect on periodically. Is there anything that I was grateful for? Sure, friendships. I made some friendships most of the ones from when I was an adult were not sustained, but maybe some that were older than that, like high school friends that I
Yeah.
met in church. I still, we're friends on Facebook. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for some of that. Did I have some good times, youth retreats and things? Sure. Sure. So there's some, yeah, I guess there's some things that I'm grateful for. Had I not done those things, I would have done something different. I'd have been just as grateful for those memories too, I think. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind
Fair.
of a left-handed compliment too.
Yeah, fair enough. If you had a million quid, $1 million that I gave you, and just I'm going to front up here, I don't have $1 million to give you, so
Damn.
that ain't happening. But if I did have $1 million to give you, what would you like to spend that on with regard to recovering from religion? Like, how would you best put that to use?
Oh gosh, you don't ever ask the executive director to talk about how you can spend money in your nonprofit. My what I would the first thing I would do is try to put an effort into put money into putting the word out that recovering from religion exists and put it in
Right.
front of the eyes of the people who need it the most. There are
Mm,
millions of people who right now are within those communities, those religious communities, and they're struggling and they're stuck and they have nowhere to go and they have no one to talk to. And I would pay any amount of money to be able to market to them and let them know, look, just come to the website, just come to recoveringfromreligion.org. You'll see how many things that we offer to try to help you along. We can't make your journey for you, but we can make your journey with you. We can help guide you and offer resources for you. Our board at our annual meeting, our annual budget meeting, starts it with that question. We start with, though, if we had $1,000, if we have $10,000, if we have $100,000, if we have $1,000,000, what are we going to do with it? So we've got big plans for that. But all of our programs have grown out of developing around answering the question, now what can we do to help? And I'll give you a perfect example. Just a couple of years ago, we came up with what we call our fall excursion. It's a weekend religion recovery retreat, like an old school church retreat, only without all the garbage. We come together, it's music and drinking and food and fun and speakers and spending time together. We realized that was a need for people. We get away from the
that's brilliant.
screens a little bit. Yes, we fellowship with one another. We do karaoke into the night. It serves a different purpose than the helpline or our support groups
But
or
this
our
goes back
online
to what is
community.
a function of religion. So for this is why the Sunday
Exactly.
Assembly was very important as a movement, or similar movements like that, or any kind of online or
Sure.
offline atheist like group is giving you that the social needs so much of religion is about social networking. When you talk about the psychology of religion, it's like, why are religious people on average more happy in this and that context? And it's very difficult. You have to unpick the stats quite a lot here,
Sure.
but
Sure.
it turns out it's nothing to do with the content of religion, and it's all to do with like existential security and and all the and social networking, all this kind of stuff. So okay, so if you're going to come out of that, we need to provide that from a secular point of view, which is exactly what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, very good point. So we depend upon we don't have a revenue stream with recovering from religion. We have no cost whatsoever to our clients. We don't have what most orgs have, a membership. We don't have anything like that. All of our workers are volunteers, and so they're giving of their time. We depend upon our partners that donate, that understand what we're trying to achieve, that are committed to furthering our mission. And so we have a fundraiser this coming Saturday. I'll just plug that. We have it's a podcast fundraiser. We have a fun bingo game. We're working right now in developing internationally. We have a big push for development in Australia. In fact, Daryl and I are going to Australia in February. And so
By
we
the way, just in the live chat, someone who wants to know how to be a volunteer has been talking to Hell's Bells, and he's from Denmark, or she, I'm
oh,
not sure.
wonderful,
So
wonderful.
there you go.
And all
Anyway,
they have to do is go. Everything is based at our website, recoveringfromreligion.org. It's an easy one to remember. There's a volunteer tab, there's a donate tab, there's all information about us. That's where our chat line is located, our telephone number for the telephone helpline and the chat line, and our online community that you can become a part of. We have our location of where all of our support groups are. We have connections to the Secular Therapy Project. It's all recoveringfromreligion.org. And then when you go and volunteer, you start with the volunteer tab, you fill out an application, you'll have an interview and training. We'll take it from there. All you've got to do is go to the website and click on the volunteer tab.
Do it. So yeah, so there you go. It's all about wanting to get the word out to the people who need it the most, and that's very difficult, isn't it? Because these are the people who are, you know, unreachable.
That's a good point.
Essentially, they're
Exactly
kind
the
of
point.
stuck in these maybe quite parochial or small town religious communities. Maybe not all of them. They're all sorts of people from different walks of life, obviously, but you can imagine these situations where you're like, how do you access those people, or how do they access you if they don't know
Sure.
about
We
you?
have some targeted marketing that we work on. We, anytime we can do things like this to be able to pimp out the org, so to speak, so that more people can hear about us. We are careful in how we market ourselves. Most of us who are part of the volunteer force of recovering from religion have come from some form of religious background, but not everyone. There are some folks who didn't have to, like me, didn't have to experience it personally to recognize the impact that it has on people, and they want to help. So we are careful in our identifying words. Most of us identify as atheist. We on a personal level, we try to let people know that's a personal identity. The org itself is not an atheist organization. It's part of the secular universe. In fact, we're a member of the Secular Coalition. Yes, that. People choose their own words to identify. We have some people who identify as atheists. We have some people who identify as a free thinker or as a secular or as an agnostic or whatever your word of choice is, because those are scary words for people that are on the religion side. Even when you're doubting, even when you don't think this is true anymore, those are still big, scary words for people. So the marketing piece is sensitive, and we're careful about that. And if we had our $1 million, we would strategically try to market ourselves to communities exactly as you identify, Johnny. These are isolated people, and they sometimes don't thank flying spaghetti monster for the internet, because
It's a close then.
that is where we put, that's where we find people. That's how we bring people to us and let them see us. The number is 84 I doubt it. And that's something that we can throw around easy, and it's easy to remember. Otherwise, everything else is at recoveringfromreligion.org. 184, or you don't have to have the one, but 84 I doubt it is the phone number.
There you go. Awesome. Okay. Well, as we sort of meander, I guess, towards the end and start wrapping things up before I do the quickfire questions with you, which I'm quite excited about. What are you most proud of? Well, what's an experience of recovering from religion that touched you the most, or talk to me a little bit about what makes you sing with pride and joy in terms of
I'm
the work you've done.
I'm happy to talk about that. Our volunteer family, and I might get a little choked up talking about this because they mean so much to me. Our volunteer family they move me on a daily basis on how compassionate they are. And we have, because of our structure, our internal technical structure, we have the ability to watch chats develop. The volunteer force, have the ability to watch chats. It helps us to help either other agents to provide resources and to watch that and say, maybe you could ask this. We work together. But the compassion that these folks display repeatedly, over and over, day after day, when sometimes I might want to be more a little more short with people, because they're struggling and they're working. And even though I can identify with that, they are so patient and so kind and so sensitive and so caring about the person. They're trying to figure out the person themselves. Where are they? What do they have in their environment that might support them or might be a good resource for them? Or how else can we help them? Maybe they can come to the online community. Maybe they could come to the fall excursion. Maybe they can find a support group for them, and they'll in the middle of a chat say, hang on 1 second, let me look. And I can see them go look in the resources to find, okay, there was a book about something, whatever the topic is that's troubling the person. And they drop the resource code into the link with the person with whom they're talking. They challenge me. They make me grow. Oh gosh, now that's really going to make me cry. I see one of my volunteers there saying such lovely, sweet things. And there are moments when we have, Johnny, someone will come in as a client and in a hot mess because they're in the middle of all that. And they work and they work and they work and they're part of our support groups, community, fall excursion, whatever it is. And there will come a day when they come in as a volunteer and the cycle is complete and they're ready to pay it forward, so to speak, and they're ready to help and reach out a hand to someone else. And those are the moments.
That's brilliant. So you can see the full journey of people.
Oh, and the privilege of participating in that and watching these folks make progress. We don't track our clients. Don't misunderstand me, but we can see when they join the online community, and we can see the conversations that they participate in there, and we can see the progress and the work that they're doing, and to be part of that and to be able to go, you know what, here's something that helped me whenever I was working through that. And someone will drop in their story as this person works through is the most, I'm not kidding, it's the most gratifying thing you can possibly imagine.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, you know, that's what a fantastic and important service you guys must be giving. It's very different. I mean, I suppose this is the difference between the UK and the States, where, you know, vaguely agnostic says my new word is apatheist, right? But which is like apathetic atheist, okay, which is basically most of Britain. So in Britain, we're like, yeah. So like I remember writing an article years ago when David Cameron was our prime minister and Nick Clegg was the deputy prime minister because they were in coalition with the Lib Dems, and the Labour leader was Ed Miliband. So Ed Miliband was a socialist Marxist sort of atheist, and Nick Clegg was an open atheist, and David Cameron was an atheist, but he said, "Oh, my religion comes and goes like the radio signal in the Chilterns, basically, which is this hilly area where you don't get very good radio." In other words, he's saying, "Yeah, I'm an atheist, really." And so we had like the three main leaders of our political parties were all atheists, and no one gave a toss. And so if someone comes up to you in Britain and you're, I don't know, you're talking in the pub and they say, "Oh, yeah, I decided I don't really believe last week," everyone's like, "Oh yeah, right, interesting." Whereas like in America, like everything that you've been talking about is like fairly alien. I mean, it's not entirely like that. There are fundamentalist churches here, and there's Islam and all sorts of other contexts. But generally speaking, religion is, even if you are religious, you don't really speak about it because, you know, you don't talk about it too much. You don't push it on. There's no, like the whole witnessing thing was quite alien to me as a British person. So like we don't really have the need so much for such an organization as yours, but as someone who knows America a lot more from 12 years of interacting with Americans, what an important service that is for the vast amount of America.
And we wouldn't have to push back so hard if religion were not so intrusive. It's intrusive in our education, it's intrusive in our politics, it's intrusive in our communities. It's, you know, we can talk about politics all day long. You can believe what you want to believe. You may not be able to act exactly the way you want to act, but you can believe what you want to believe. You just can't tell me how that I have to believe because you believe that your book says this. And that's a simple concept that is lost on them because religion is telling them the opposite. Religion is telling them it is their responsibility to change other people. It is their responsibility to bring this gospel message to other people. And so we're in conflict about this. And we wouldn't, you know, recovering from religion wouldn't have the need that we have if religion were not, and it's not just the US, because of course we're international. And so it's all religions of all sorts, of all kinds, all over the world. When they try to control people's behavior and tell them how to act and how to be and what the rules are going to be, and that person is not able to conform to that, now the damage begins. And so we're in a reactive response. I'm not trying to eradicate religion from the world. That's a different nonprofit. That's not me. I don't know how to do that. My job is to catch the fallout from what religion does on a daily basis all over the world.
You reminded me of Anna Kasparian. She's a host for the Young Turks. You may or may not know. She had a rant that went viral. She made it a couple of years ago about, you can't tell me what to do with the Bible. And she has that rant, and it's just
it's
on
just perfect.
point.
Yes,
it's on point, which is kind of what you were just saying, which is like, yeah, you can have those opinions, but you can't tell me what to think based on your holy book,
because what your
that
book
ain't
says.
that ain't my holy book.
That's right. That's right. That's what freedom of religion is that I don't have to conform to that. So don't tell me that I have to conform to what your book says. You conform to your book all you want to.
Yeah.
I don't have to.
Exactly.
And they just don't. Yeah, they just don't get that.
Brilliant. And this is a weird thing about you guys, is that you're a secular nation, and you've talked to me about how intrusive religion is into society, and we are like not a secular nation.
That's right.
I was going to say our Queen is the head of the Church of England, but it's a king now. It's the head of the Church of England, and that the head of state, and we're like, yeah, whatever.
Whatever. You know? I know. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Thank you. So just before we get on to the quickfire questions for you, thank you so much to Ricky Johnson, who is, and he said that he would love to donate as well to you. So what I wanted to do, I'll do that in a second, which is, well, in fact, I think I can do it now because, you know, I'm so tech awesome. Is that is the fundraiser I think you've got going.
That's
so
the fundraiser. Wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. Check me out. Woo.
And if you can also participate in the bingo game. If you want to attend the fundraiser, we'll be playing bingo for the entire duration of the podcast fundraiser. So you might even win a prize. So you can do it that way too.
Happy days. So everyone's a winner, or at least some people are winners. I don't know. So yeah, fantastic. So thank you, Ricky Johnson. I really enjoyed this interview, and I look forward to supporting recovering from religion. I hope to attend a future retreat.
Oh, we hope you can too, Ricky. We'd love to have you.
So I interviewed him. He's a member of the channel. He's a Lestadian. I don't know if you know the Lestadian religion. It's like a Swedish church that's part of the Lutheran sort of movement, I think, or similar to, not exactly, it's actually quite different, but yeah, really interesting. So his deconversion and deconstruction is a fascinating story. So very diagnostic. Thanks, mate. Thank you for what you do, Gail. Thanks for taking time to tell us your experience, and thanks, Shana. No problem.
Such a pleasure
at all. Yeah. So quick fire questions.
Okay.
What is your favorites? Okay, if you could go on holiday now, where would you go?
Greece.
Interesting. Why?
Why it was just among the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. It's peaceful and sunny and warm.
So it's going back. You liked it that much, you go back?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. I've just written a book about Greece, although I've never been. So here's a book plug. I do this so often, but I've not done it. I've only plugged one book so far, Gail, so do forgive me. So I wrote a book for kids 9 to 15-year-old. It's got like philosophy in. It's about twins, right? So a boy and a girl, 12-year-olds, and they go on an adventure with their archaeologist dad. The Curse of the Maya, set in Guatemala. And then the sequel is set in Greece. It's called Grease Lightning.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so they go and do an archaeological dig in the sea. Well, it's not really a dig, is it? It's shipwreck. But anyway, that's Greece. That's completely spamming the show here. So sorry, Gail. Okay, what's your favorite book?
My
fiction book.
Oh, favorite fiction. Oh my gosh. Probably one of my favorites. I would not dream of saying favorite. One of my favorites is The Life of Pi. Did you read this one?
Right.
Yeah, the whole anyway.
I've not read it.
I won't spoil it, but the whole parallel stories, I just loved it. Loved it.
Excellent. Favorite nonfiction book?
I'm favorite in a hard way is what I'm currently reading. It's called American Crusade by Andrew Seidel. It's how the Supreme Court has weaponized religious freedom in the United States. If you're into politics and religion and all of that, it's what I'm reading right now, and I can't get enough of it. I'm just devouring it.
Does it not make you angry though?
Oh, makes me furious, but it's a good fury. It's a good fury. It is so important for us to know that what is happening. So
Yeah.
it's yes, I want everybody to read it.
Presi- pres- Presidential elections are only about Supreme Court nominations.
That's it's what it's come to. That's what it's come to. Yes.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Oh gosh, I should have spent more time reflecting on this. Do
You
you
didn't do
know
your research, maybe after all.
the old movie Giant? It's got Elizabeth Taylor, uh, James Dean. It's about a woman who goes from Virginia to Texas. Anyway, it's long story. Old movie called Giant.
Giant. Okay. Thank you. Favorite TV series or series?
I have just finished watching House of the Dragon. Not necessarily my usual kind. I loved West Wing. I'm kind of more cerebral like that.
Bloody love West Wing.
Oh, just love it. But I've just finished watching House of the Dragon. Enjoyed every minute of it. It's a whole complete fantasy. You lose yourself in the moment. Just loved it.
I'm yet to watch that, but I will. It's on the list. If you could go and see a band or a musician or some kind of music maker, dead or alive, that you haven't seen before, who would they or he?
Oh
or
gosh,
she
dead
be?
or alive, you complicated it. Dead would be the Beatles. Alive would be Lizzo.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
Check you down with the kids and all that.
I'm hip.
Fair. Yep. Don't deny it. So you are just about to get executed for your heathenness. And just to plug your heathenness, of course, you do have a blog called Happy Healthy Heathen, because you're a healthy person. You're also a personal trainer or former personal trainer. Is that correct? So at Happy Healthy Heathen, go and check GayleJordan.net out. Anyway, that's all good and well, but you are just about to get executed, so that's all pointless. What would be your last supper?
Oh, my last meal? My last meal.
Thank you, Melody, by the way.
What's that?
I was just saying thank you, Melody, who's given a super sticker. Really appreciate it.
I am a Southern girl. So it would probably be, I could probably list the whole thing. It would probably be a big pot of chicken and dumplings and sweet potato casserole and green beans and mashed potatoes and cornbread.
That is very Southern American. I
Very
will grant you
Southern.
that. If you had two more, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
The ability to move faster than time. In other words, as you move through time stands still, and you can move through time.
What would you want to do?
Everything and anything. I think because it has been not been recognized as a superpower. I don't know what the limitations would be. I don't know exactly what you could do, but you could move around inside of time while everybody else stood still. So for me, because of what I wanted to do, I would do everything. I would go everywhere. I would do everything. So you have the opportunity. So you travel. You go somewhere instantly, and then you go back into regular time, and you live, and then instantly you travel somewhere else. And so for me, I would experience everything.
Yeah, I've a similar one to you. I've always wanted to invent a sleeping machine whereby I could get all my entire night's sleep in 10 minutes, and then I could use the rest of the time
condense it, and then same kind of concept, concept that you can maximizing your time. Yes,
just we've only got a certain amount of time. I want to bloody use it. Thank you. So final question. You are just about to, and this is where I normally do another spam. So book about like dystopian zombie philosophy series here. So you're just about to get your face eaten off by some zombies. You have luckily just made a prepper cellar basement thing. And you have time to just rush down there and grab 3 people from history, alive or fictional or whatever. But you can't take your family, so
you can't take your kids. I knew you were going to shut me down.
Anyway, that would have been uncomfortable because you got 4 kids, and someone would have to be.
Oh gosh, that's a question.
Sophie's choice there, so it'd be like, oh no, it's definitely that one. I mean, everyone says they don't have a favorite. Okay, I don't have a favorite, but a worse one. It would be that kid. So I wouldn't want to put you on that spot. But what three people would you take? famous people to
To
spend
be
a
down in
month
the
in a
zombie
basement with.
basement with me, just for interesting sake, not because they can help me against the zombie attack. I would take Charles Darwin, FDR,
Oh,
and John F. Kennedy. Don't ask me why it's politics or why I chose what I chose. There's just what's popping into
why
my
why
head.
FDR?
I just think because he was so radical about what he believed and what he implemented, while at the same time he had this, he was not a perfect person. And so I just think he would be a fascinating person to talk to and to learn from.
Interesting. Interesting.
Who
Well,
who
look,
are your three in your zombie basement?
I don't know. I sometimes my classic is I want to have like a month long set of arguments about philosophy and religion.
Of
So I'll
course.
take something like William Lane Craig, I don't
Oh,
know,
sure,
Rabbi
sure.
Tavia Singer, and Richard Carey or something. Just like have a month of everyone just arguing.
Of course, of course.
But then at other times I think no, I'd take the musician and this person that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever. But look, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for what you do, of course, and the contributions you make to the secular community in America, and as you say, worldwide as well, with the intentions and organization of recovering from religion. Please, everyone, check out the work that Gail and her colleagues do. Get involved, help out. You can go to their website at as not that one, but you can go there. Please do. Let me just go back. It is
Right there.
recoveringfromreligion.org.
Yes.
And if you do that, you will see everything they have to offer and all the things that they do, all the great things they do.
Johnny, thank
Um,
you for the opportunity to come speak to you about it. And I enjoyed getting to know you too. You and I didn't know each other before today. I appreciate that. I appreciate your chatters chiming in. It was a wonderful conversation, and I so look forward to continuing this.
yeah, brilliant. Look, if ever you want to come on again, door is always open. I am a willing host for anyone who can be bothered to come on. Pretty much. No,
I'm going to I'll put Daryl right in your square, right in your sights.
Oh, please do. That'd be absolutely fantastic. But as I say, as I always say, thank you so much to the people who have been watching this, the live chatters, the people who have been contributing, people who are members of the channel, because without you guys, I literally wouldn't be doing this. So it's massively, massively appreciated. Thank you. Thank you to Gail, who's been such a gracious, fantastic guest. And as I always say to you guys, question everything, particularly yourselves. Or you are the easiest person to fool. So yeah. And with all that, thank you, Gail. Toodle pits to everyone. And until next time, stay safe and be cool.
Thank you.